Hey Flames families, welcome to Flamekeepers, a podcast from UIC's new student and family programs that supports the parents and families of UIC students. I'm your host, Derek Robert Fuchs, Associate Director for Family and Transition Programs here at UIC, and on today's episode, we are joined by our friends from UIC's Disability Resource Center to discuss all things about seeking accommodations and finding more support on campus. Flamekeepers audiences, please give a warm welcome to our special guest, Sophia Hamilton, the Director of UIC's Disability Resource Center. Sophia, thank you so much for being here today. And before we get started on any of our conversations, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself and how long you've been at UIC?
My name is Sophia Hamilton. I'm the Director of the Disability Resource Center, the DRC at UIC. I've been at UIC since late 2018. So about 8 years. And before that, I was doing a similar job, but at Kennedy King College, which is one of the city colleges of Chicago. So I have been supporting students with disabilities in higher education for over a dozen years, let's say. So it is an area that I'm really passionate about. Accessibility of education is really important to me. And I'm so excited to share information with the families who are listening.
Sophia, before we begin talking about how families can support their students in this area, can you provide us with an overview of the Disability Resource Center and how they support students here at UIC?
Absolutely. So the DRC is the office on campus that's responsible for student accommodations and accessibility for students with diagnosed disabilities. The first thing to know is that that is a big umbrella term, students with disabilities. So we're talking about things technically from a legal perspective, and the ADA defines disability very broadly. What this means for our students is that there are plenty of folks who qualify for our services and use our services who maybe don't strictly identify as disabled, but maybe they say, I have a mental health condition, and that does come up in an academic setting sometimes. Or I have a chronic health condition and I do plan to live on campus, so I just need to make sure that my living arrangements meet my needs, right? So that is also most certainly under the umbrella, as well as folks who are impacted strictly in an academic sense, folks with learning disabilities, ADHD, of course, folks with mobility impairments or folks who use any kind of mobility aids, wheelchairs, walkers, all that kind of stuff, and folks with sensory disabilities. So we have many students on campus who are blind or low vision, and a growing population of students who are deaf or hard of hearing. So we are the office that works one-on-one with these students and figures out, are there barriers in any part of the design of your college experience that are preventing you, because of your disability, from being in an equal playing field with your peers. So we can't, at the college level, guarantee equal success for students with disabilities, but it's the job of the DRC to guarantee equal access, right? So everyone's on that equal playing field, everyone gets a chance and is not undermined by some design element like the way a building is designed or the way a test is designed. We're here to put accommodations in place to remove those barriers so that students are able to learn at an equal playing field, demonstrate what they know at an equal playing field, and fully access and enjoy the college experience.
Yeah, I mean, we just want students to be able to do their best.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, we're all in the business of student success, and success looks different and requires different things, different elements. And so, that's what I heard. You are really helping to ensure that students with pre-existing conditions who might identify as disabled are being successful here.
100%. Yeah. And for many of them, getting accommodations in place is what puts them in the running to be successful.
Can we talk about that real quick? Can we talk about, how would a student begin this process, especially as we're thinking about a new incoming class? How do students go about starting this process, especially coming from high school, maybe where they had a 504 or an IEP? I think a lot of students and families sometimes find it surprising they can continue to receive similar accommodations post K-12. And so how would a student start that conversation or process with your office?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I imagine that there are probably some folks listening who are going, does this mean like an IEP or 504? And the answer is yes and no. So
yes, but.
Yes, and so If you have an IEP or a 504, if your student has an IEP or a 504, that's a pretty good indication that they have a qualifying disability and can get accommodations in college. Now, what exactly those accommodations look like may be a little different. And here's the really critical part is how that student engages with the process is very different when you are in K through 12 education versus in college. So you must make yourself known to us. We don't know you're here, right? I hear this all the time and it breaks my heart. Students will come in and say, do you have my IEP? And we go, no, who are you? Hello, welcome, right? But no, none of this stuff is sort of sent automatically or on a student's behalf. In primary school, it's the school's responsibility to identify folks with disabilities, to make sure they're getting assessment, to put accommodations in place. And all of those things still exist in college, but the student has to initiate.
This is something that we talk a lot about. Is probably one of the big transitions to college is just students are now more in the driver's seat. They're dictating all of their experience, which I know is sometimes really, really hard for our families, especially, if they were the ones, in those meetings with the instructors or the teachers talking about the accommodations that their student receives. And so, this whole thing about self-advocacy, is what I'm getting at.
100%. I'm remembering your actual question, which is where do they start?
Thank you. Thanks for bringing us back.
Yes. And I'm also reminded that, we're not pushing families out the door, right?
No. Absolutely not.
We have meetings with parents present, with guardians present, with advocates present often, right? So starting with us means filling out a quick form and then scheduling an intake meeting. The intake meeting is scheduled for an hour. Sometimes they last an hour, sometimes less, sometimes more. But that's where we start, and we can meet over phone, over Zoom, or in person in our office, which is in the Student Services building. Here's the important nuance. Yes, a parent can attend a meeting as a support person. We do allow that. The student has to consent to that, right? So the student is already in the driver's seat. They are the ones we are trying to schedule the appointment with. They are the ones we're going to be asking questions to about, what is your disability and what might you need, what's worked for you in the past and what hasn't. And again, we're not trying to shut down the perspectives of other folks who may have good, ideas, but it's really going to be the student now who is behind the wheel. If we're keeping that metaphor going, they're the ones we're going to be really, driving that meeting with. And ultimately, the student is the one who is going to be sharing the accommodation letters with their instructor as well. So, self-advocacy is sort of a requirement for the process of requesting and receiving accommodations in college. The DRC has so many structures in place to help students do that.
Yeah. And Sophia, what types of accommodations or could a student receive? I know I've worked, in higher ed for a while as well, things like additional time on tests or exams and things like that. But what are some accommodations that students have received here at UIC? And I know it's student dependent, case by case.
For sure.
And so.
Yeah. And I will take a moment to plug our website.
Ooh, yes.
drc.uic.edu. You are absolutely right in saying it's not prescriptive by disability, but there are many accommodations that tend to come up over and over, and we have a whole sort of common accommodations drop-down menu where you can take a look and see what others have benefited from in the past. But certainly, yes, testing accommodations is one of our number ones. So if you need extra time to take a test, right? If a time constraint is a barrier to you performing to your actual ability on the test, then we can work with you and work with your instructors to make sure that you're getting extended test time, which is very similar to a lot of people's IEPs from high school. Similarly, like a distraction-reduced testing environment. We have a whole infrastructure in the Student Services building for folks who need testing accommodations. We're also the office that does captioning for folks who are deaf,
Oh.
American Sign Language interpreters for folks who are deaf, alternate format. So if someone came in and said, I have dyslexia and I really need my books multimodally. I need to be able to see them visually at the same time that I'm listening to them with my ears. Typically, we can help you, make the specific course materials that you have work with that equipment, or we also have a lot of assistive technology ourselves that we can offer or suggest or walk people through. We actually just met this morning with one of our big software providers, vendors for Genio Audio Note Taker.
Oh, wow.
Which is, a lot of students really like. So anyone who has barriers to focusing on what's happening in class and taking accurate notes at the same time. And there are a lot of different reasons why that might be, right? That could be some of our students with ADHD, could be folks who have some kind of visual processing disorder or auditory processing disorder. They're saying, if I'm spending all of my focus and energy on trying to take notes, I'm not really listening, something like that. Genio actually does audio recording with a lot of really cool interactive features. You can mark up the audio, you can annotate it, you can connect it to your slides so that you have a full comprehensive set of notes and transcript from which to work for each class. So we're the ones who would work with the student and say, hey, it really sounds like you would benefit from Genio, or, oh, you audio recorded notes when you were in high school. We don't quite do that, but we do something also cool and similar like this, and we'd set them up with that kind of technology. Let me see, what haven't we talked about? We talked a little bit about housing accommodations. That's us. Transportation around campus. So, so if someone said, because of my mobility, I may need basically point-to-point paratransit. Yep, we coordinate that. So, it depends on the individual, but there are multitudes of things that we can adjust or, make more supportive.
Yeah, and these can be, are these more short-term and long-term accommodations?
So it depends on the person. We are also the office who handles, like, if someone has an injury.
I was going to say,
like a
if,
temporary,
like somebody breaks their finger on their dominant hand they used to write with. Would you be the office that steps in and provides support during that time?
Absolutely. Or paratransit actually is a good example. Unfortunately, we're the ones who, if you broke your leg.
Slipping on ice here in Chicago.
I hate to say it. Or, oh my gosh, I shouldn't.
I feel like you're a real Chicagoan when you take your first, when you take your first, slip on the sidewalk.
Oh, good grief. Everyone be safe out there. But if you do break your leg, let's say you break your leg, talk to us. We can make sure your classrooms are accessible. We do furniture, we work with a lot of our vets, and folks who maybe say, I need a specific kind of seat because I have a back injury or something like that. So really just reach out.
This is, one of the things I really love about this podcast, in addition to, just being able to support our families, is I learned so much, that we can continue to share out, with our audiences. And so, thank you so much. The services that you all, provide, it is there's something beneath this iceberg. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things. And you work with so many people on campus.
It is true. Actually, that's something that I meant to make sure I said on the podcast, because I think this is an important thing for incoming families to know. We don't just work with undergrad students, right? We're graduating dozens of law school degree holders, people who are going to become lawyers, right? Future doctors with disabilities, future nurses with disabilities. We're working with every college on campus, pharmacy. And it is a particular joy when we have someone who comes here for their undergraduate and then they get to tell us, hey, I graduated, and by the way, I'm going to go do my master's in biomedical engineering. So I just want to update my letter of accommodation because it may be a little different in grad school, So this can be just the beginning. It is part of the fabric of UIC to a large degree. We, diversity is so important to us at UIC. It's in our mission, and we consider disability to be a part of that diversity, a valuable part of that diversity. So at every level, we are, we're working with those different departments to make sure that folks are getting the support that they need.
Thank you so much for sharing so much about these services. Sophia, we talked about self-advocacy and really the students being the person who makes the first step into getting support from your office. And so this is, podcast is designed for our families. And so would just love to hear some of your perspectives on how can a family support their student, we'll start with if their student's feeling a little bit insecure or unsure, I know that I've talked with college students just in my tenure and working with them, and there are students, who said, I had this and had these accommodations in high school, but I don't want to use them in college because I want to break away from that. I don't think I need it. And so how can you, if you find if families are kind of in this boat with their student, how would you encourage them or support them?
This comes up a lot. So I'm so glad you asked. And I'm going to give more of a student support feel good answer. And then I'm going to give a purely logistics, pragmatic answer. Okay. So
both perspectives are very helpful here.
Good. So the first part of the answer ties back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is none of your instructors at UIC are going to be surprised to get your letter of accommodation. 10% of our student population is registered for some kind of accommodation. Now, it's interesting because at the college level, it's a lot more private, right? That's why the student has to start the process themselves, because we're not sharing your information with anyone without you knowing. You drive that process. So the unintended consequence of the confidentiality sometimes is that I don't think students realize how common this is. It is incredibly common. You are not alone, and your faculty expect you and truly just want to know what they can do to help you and support you, right? So we don't want you to hesitate because you feel as though you're going to be judged or this will somehow reflect on you in any kind of way, because that really just isn't the culture that exists here at UIC. And it's not a deficit, right? It is not a weakness to ask for help. It is strategic. It is smart. You are entitled to it legally, and you're only going to get support. I can pretty much guarantee it when you reach out to your instructors in this way. Okay, that's the feel-good answer. The pragmatic answer is there are some policy implications to not registering for accommodations, to not giving your letter of accommodation to your instructors, because at the college level, accommodations apply going forward from the time you send your letter of accommodation.
It's not retroactive.
If you have the option to either put this in place before you start classes in August, send the letter to your instructors, and then go, oh, maybe I didn't need it after all, there's no loss, right? There's no downside there. Versus if you go, oh yeah, I did always use my accommodations in high school, but maybe I won't need them now. Or even I didn't use my accommodations in high school, so I probably won't need them now. Or I'll just wait until I'm sweating it and then I'll, put my accommodations in place. And you come and meet with us and we have our meeting, and, the process it doesn't take a really long time, but it isn't instantaneous, right? And we put these accommodations in place, and then you send out your letter of accommodation, and you already have an exam where you really bombed it, or a couple past due assignments. It may be a little late, right? It may be a little late in the game. And if I swear, I always say when students say this to me, I hope that goes straight from your mouth into the ears of every incoming freshman, but at least once a week, someone says to our office, I wish I'd done this sooner. I wish I'd done this sooner. And that could be someone in their junior year, right? Or that could be someone in the midterms of their first semester. We really try to get the word out there. We're at every orientation session. We really want for folks to know that we are an option. But if you don't take that first step and you don't follow through, your faculty won't know, the institution won't know, and then we can't be responsible for that time when you didn't have the accommodations.
Yeah, and so, get the support.
Get the support.
Get the support.
Why not? Also, the other benefit, I would say, to having a connection in the DRC, and this certainly isn't unique to the DRC, but I think it's, important to think about, is that we work with nearly every department on campus, right? So, there are many questions we can't answer, but we are one email away from the person who can answer it, right? So, we're not financial aid, but do we help students get answers to their financial aid questions? Of course we do. We're not academic advisors, but we work with academic advising. We have specialists in our office who are dedicated to each college, right? So I'll shout out Melanie Salas, who works with engineering. She knows every chair of every engineering department in engineering. She knows all of the directors of undergraduate studies. We can help not just with disability stuff, but if you make us your partner.
And it's not that, we can help. It's we want to help you.
Yes.
There is folks families and, if you're listening, we want to help your students. We want them to come to our offices. We want them, to seek us out. And I would say even, from my area, we want students to come to us, when they are feeling like, hey, I just need some transitional support. Because then it's like you're saying, we connect them to folks like you over at the DRC. And then, it just becomes a web. I like to liken the whole college experience, especially amongst colleagues, is an ecosystem. We're all helping each other and supporting each other with your student at the center.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate all of that. But what would you say to our families who are maybe in this boat? How can they help demystify some of the things that we've talked about and get their students to that place where they can come to your office to reach out for that appointment, to schedule those things?
Yeah. I think each family probably has a very different relationship with their student's disability. And I think talking about it and trying to help the student feel a little bit more comfortable talking about it. And oftentimes it really is about following through on communication, right? And just, if folks are reaching out, reply to the emails, push through the fear, the fear that something bad's going to happen, the stigma, if you really are, because it is real, right? We want everyone to feel really safe, but sometimes it can feel a little bit like, I have to admit that I need help. And I promise if you make it through that, push of I just need to reply and say, okay, fine, let's meet. Or
my mother always tells me that the best way to mitigate any type of anxiety or tension or uncomfortableness that you're feeling is with action. Just a small step, like you're saying, replying to an email, just saying, yes, I think I would like to, come in. Is there a good time? That works.
Sometimes it's easier because we have multiple ways to engage with us. And all right, this may be a little bit of a generational thing. I remember, I've been at UIC long enough that I remember a point where I was like, no one leaves us voicemails anymore. I used to get voicemails and now none of our students leave us voicemails. It's technology moves on, right? So they can also just reach out via iAdvise. If it feels like a lot to pick up the phone and talk to us, if your feet find yourself walking over to the Student Services building and it's between 8:30 and 5 p.m., we will find a way to put you on the calendar. If you log into your iAdvise and it's easier for you to do a few clicks and schedule time with us, you can do that. But you have to push through the discomfort of what's going to happen. I guess the other thing I should mention is you'll be in control of your information at every step. And all of a sudden it's like everybody knows that you have depression or something. That's, we're here to protect your information in large part and also to point you in the right direction, right? And every step of the way you get to decide, like, do I want to share my accommodations with my instructor? We're almost always going to say, just do it. But, if there's a circumstance where you're like, actually, for this class, I don't want to use accommodations, you can absolutely, you're in control.
Absolutely.
You're in control.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing all of that. And, really, it is about students just getting the care and support, that they need, and families, taking that stance. And, I remember working with a family and just, saying like, a good thing to, just maybe post to them, this was after orientation, and, the family's saying, my student, came in saying, I don't want to, file for accommodations or, things like that. And, they were saying, how can we get our student to do this? They have to want to do it. They have, and that is so hard, but they have to see the need.
Yes.
I remember after that orientation session, I touched base with them and I said, I think a good question would be, okay, now that we've done orientation, how are you still feeling about your decision to not maybe put in for your accommodations? And, that way it does allow the student to, share how they feel. And, I think this is just where it's tough, where it's like, okay, well, we support your decision, and I think we just lay out, the facts and, how a student, could be successful. And it's, it is on them.
Yeah. They get to decide. You get to decide if you're going to use accommodations.
Sophia, thank you for just everything that you've shared. Before we wrap up our episode officially, what advice would you want to share, or if you have any advice that you would want to share with our families who are listening in, just about, how they can just support their student, maybe, in the general sense, during their time at UIC?
I guess I have two thoughts, and neither of them are very novel, but one we've already talked about, which is use the resources. Sometimes I see folks act as though resources are in a bucket and everyone only gets so much. It's a finite resource and I don't want to take too many or this kind of thing. No, just use them. That is why they're there. We're all here because we want to support you. I have students who, started struggling academically early on, and they made the brilliant decision to go around the student services building. Someone from DRC will do this with you if you want. Go around the student services building, pick up a flyer for ACE. Oh, you walk down the hall, pick up a flyer for AAAN, maybe schedule some time with an academic coach or with a tutor. And then they can say, okay, on Mondays, I check in at ACE. I'm on their list now, so they know about me, and I have an academic coach at ACE. Oh, on Wednesdays, I check in with my AAAN tutor to make sure, that I'm on track in terms of my career planning. And then on Fridays, I meet with Laris because they have this really cool, identity-based celebration series or whatever, right? And they're working it and it works, right?
Schedule and structure.
Yep.
Tend to equal success.
Absolutely. And everyone loves to support these students, right? It's like they become sort of celebrities of the building. So use the resources. And then, the other one is to really listen, right? And that's cheesy advice, but I have the privilege of listening to so many brilliant disabled people, and I can say with confidence that we don't listen to disabled people enough. And if you are listening to this, are probably very close to a disabled adult, or you may be, who is growing into adulthood and, is going to face some unique challenges at UIC and in life. And, their perspectives are really important and make space to give tons of advice. I'm sure you have tons of advice. I'm a parent. Okay. I can't stop thinking about what my kids should or shouldn't do. But, leave some space for their voice as well and listen to them.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sophia. How can families and students reach out if they have any questions about anything that we've covered today? I know you talked about the website. Is there another way that, students can get in touch or families can get in touch?
So our front desk number is 312-413-2183. We'll call you back even if you don't leave a voicemail. We changed that protocol when folks stopped leaving voicemails.
Sophia really likes voicemails, you all.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I don't get excited when people leave them, but I'm just saying it's not required. Yeah, you can call us to schedule an appointment. You can schedule via iAdvise, which if you have a net ID, you should have access to iAdvise.
Which I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't mention this earlier when we talked about it. iAdvise is an online platform that students can use to communicate with their advisors and their success networks, because we have a lot of different folks who are in advising roles here. And so, your student may have multiple different advisors. They may have a success coach, advisor, and they have their academic advisor in the academic college, but they may have their career advisor in career services. And so if you hear iAdvise, advisor, that's kind of what we're talking about, the online communication platform that students utilize.
Yep, and you can schedule appointments with folks in the DRC that way pretty easily. Also, everyone gets assigned a point person. So once you're registered, it'll feel less like the DRC, like this office, and it'll be like, oh, Kelly. I just talked to Kelly, who is my DRC person, or I just talked to Gail or whoever. So first contact drc.uic.edu or the number that I mentioned, or stop by our office, first floor of the Student Services Building. You can also email drc@uic.edu, and that's our general email address.
Excellent. So a bunch of different ways that folks can get in contact with y'all. And so folks, who are listening, really please get in contact with the DRC should you need accommodations, should you have questions about your accommodations, and reach out to other resources as well. If you think you might benefit from their service, sending an email doesn't hurt, just to schedule an appointment or just learn more. And so families encourage your student, to reach out early and reach out often. And so, Sophia, we got to wrap it up here, but thank you so much for joining us today. And families, thank you for tuning into this episode of Flamekeepers. We really value and appreciate your support that you provide to your students. And, we hope that you join us for our next episode. Take care, Flames families. Well, Flames families, that's going to wrap up another episode of Flamekeepers, the podcast that seeks to support the parents and families of UIC students. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions for us about anything that we've talked about today, please feel free to send us an email at famhelp@uic.edu. That's famhelp@uic.edu. Again, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of Flamekeepers and that you join us for our next one. Take care.